Kevin Haig.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. When we hear the word home, we think of belonging, security, warmth, safety, and the Green Party believes that it is the right of every person in this country to those qualities, the right to a home. We've campaigned on this issue now for many years, and we're proud of the role that we've played both in partnership with Labor and then subsequently with National to try to ensure that we could get as close to that as we could. Mr. Speaker, we've done so because we recognise that those qualities are the ones that are necessary, absolutely necessary, if a person is to be able to go on to fulfil their potential as a human being. Mr. Speaker, that is surely the fundamental responsibility of a government. That's the very first thing that a government owes its citizens. Mr. Speaker, I want to quote from someone who wrote to me and said, "For what it's worth, I have one of the better and more expensive rental properties in Porirua East, and mine would meet just one of the criteria, which is decent ventilation. As in, the kitchen windows don't shut flush. It has broken toilets, cracked guttering, old wiring with broken power points and blown light fittings, no internal heating, there's a broken heat pump that the landlord won't fix, no underfloor insulation, and mice holes in the walls and ceiling. This was the best I could afford after a month of hunting and applications." Mr. Speaker, the health consequences of poor housing are manifold, and others have already spoken about them, but they are of two sorts. One is a consequence of a shortage of affordable supply, and that is the consequence of overcrowding, with its consequences of rheumatic heart disease, of respiratory infections, of skin infections, and the other type of consequence are the consequences that come from poor quality housing, cold housing, drafty housing, mouldy housing. Mr. Speaker, in the government's health strategy recently announced, one of its actions is to support families, especially those with newborn babies, to have healthy housing, warm, dry and smoke-free, and address crowding issues to reduce transmission of infectious diseases, infant mortality and family stress. But, Mr. Speaker, actually I don't believe them. And I don't believe them because actually that poor quality housing serves as a safety valve for National's complete failure to actually supply affordable housing in sufficient quantity. Mr. Speaker, that's why Nick Smith's legislation is such a pale facsimile of what is actually required, with its failure to address many of the significant issues, with its inclusion of obsolete insulation standards. His claim in the House this evening that many of the issues like home heating are already dealt with by existing law and regulation is disingenuous, sir, because he knows that his government doesn't enforce that law, doesn't enforce those regulations, and he has not taken any of the opportunities that have been available to him to actually change that. Mr. Speaker, Minister Smith said that he would welcome the opportunity for this bill to be debated in select committee. Paul Foster-Bell has said the same thing. Well, Mr. Speaker, that's a traditional way of dealing with disagreements about some legislation, improvements that could be made to legislation. So why then is National not voting for this bill tonight? It's not voting for the bill tonight because fundamentally it wants to protect that safety valve for itself. Mr. Speaker, in doing so, it fails that basic test of a government, that basic duty that it owes every person in this country to a warm, safe, healthy and secure home.
Mark Mitchell.